Sini, I feel like your film has gained so much more importance today than even when it came out. But for you, what has the life of this film been for you? I feel like there's phases of this film.
I was thinking about this yesterday, and there does kind of feel like three different phases of working on the film, thinking about it, and then up until now. Early 2000s is when I met Kathleen Hanna, and we were fighting George W. Bush, who was in office right after 9/11, and there were massive protests going on. And what we saw from all of that effort wasn't much. So there was like a political depression that then set in. And around 2005, Kathleen left her last band, Le Tigre. And they were very much like a protest band. You know, they were like an energizing, feminist perspective protest band that you could dance to, you know? So when they stopped playing, of course their fans were bummed, but there was another political moment of not having a lot going on around us. The film came out in 2013. We were doing, there was all the slut shaming happening, the slut walks were happening. It was like pre-Me Too for sure, but that fighting against sexual harassment, sexual assault was coming up a lot. And now, 10 years later, after its release, we've been through the Trump era. We've been through, you know, the right wing trying to ban abortion across the country. And if they get into office, they will. And I feel like it's a real moment where, yeah, somebody like Kathleen Hanna is a real motivator. You know, she's traditionally been really great at motivating people. And when you're suffering political depression and there's so much media in so many places and news is shitty wherever you turn, you need art that's going to uplift you, that's going to feed you, and that's going to motivate you forward to fight whatever it is that we need to fight at that moment. There's so much to fight right now. So I love screening the film 10 years later. I would love it if a bunch of young people found it and if it was motivating for them as well.
Let's rewind to 2013. I've always been curious. You got to take this film to South by, very much a height of South by, and I'm curious, what was Austin like when you were there? And with everyone there, what was that experience like? It must have been surreal.
Yeah, South by Southwest is a little bit of a blur because finishing the film was really intense. It was really difficult. There was a lot of butting heads. It was a real lesson in filmmaking for sure. And the stress of finishing it and getting it to the festival. So it was a very late set mission. Janet was amazing by letting us come in at the last second. Getting there and then watching it on the big screen was the payoff. You know what I mean? I was like, it's done. It's done. There's credits rolling. It's finished. The audience seems to like it. Here we are. Of course, I want to do this again. Whereas, like, the few days before that, I was like, I will never do this again. I will never put myself through that. But seeing the art finished and seeing it on a screen makes anything seem possible again, right? So being at South by Southwest was really, really energizing for me in that way.
How much footage did you get? How many interviews? I mean, all of the great people from Kim to Carrie. I mean, there's so many amazing moments you have, but how much footage did you actually have?
We had a lot of footage. Can I take one break for a second?
Drink break.
Yeah. Thank you. Very dehydrated. To calculate the amount of footage I have, I don't even know how to begin doing that because I'm so obsessed with my current project and the 25 terabytes that I have on that one. Story for another time. But we shot The Punk Singer over a period of 1 year, and I wanted to shoot it seasonally. And we shot the bulk of the footage and the really intimate stuff at Kathleen's lake house, like in New Jersey. So we are away from the city, we are away from everything. And my crew and I stayed there for 7 to 10 days, and we shot the whole time. And we really took our time, and I was so happy with the footage that we got out of those interviews. Kathleen was really, really generous and open and willing to let me push her a little bit to get a deeper answer. And my DPs were smart enough to not cut when she wasn't replying right away, which is like my biggest pet peeve. Because the best things happen when you don't know what to say, you know? And we had a lot of those moments, so it was really great. And then I followed her around a bunch, and then I jumped into her archive at the NYU Fails Archive, a downtown collection. So we had a lot of material to cut with, and I feel like there definitely could be a part 2 with the footage that we have that nobody has ever seen, like such important and beautiful footage and great interviews. So, but you know, trying to portray an artist in under 90 minutes is, you know, practically impossible.
I know it was tough getting stuff out of her. I'm curious, how close do you feel you got to not just Kathleen, but so many of these wonderful people? Like, how immersed are into this movement, this moment in time were you?
Well, yeah, the other people that we interviewed, the outsiders. So I did a bunch of outside interviews. I wanted to finish with Kathleen for the most part first, with the exception of a bulk of the footage where you see Joan Jett, Tavi Gavinson, Kim Gordon, all these amazing people that are inside the van. Yeah. That was all done on one night. So I was like, how am I going to get as many voices as possible to state what Kathleen and what her music has meant to people? So I decided to do a tribute show to Kathleen. So it could be a cover of any of her songs from any of her bands. And I think it was 22 bands participated that night, and I had an amazing crew. My friend Sarah Ray Garrett AD'd it, and she's like the AD of The Good Wife, right? So it was like, this shit was tight, you know? It was like the band would be 3 bands backstage at a time. They would go on, do a Kathleen cover, then they were brought down this long hallway, spit out onto the street in Brooklyn, where they climbed into a van where I was. They put a wool blanket over themselves, and I did like a 10-minute interview. And we did that, boom, 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 for 3 hours, and we wrapped an hour early. It was like this crazy dream, but that was really, really fun. It was really, really fun. And Joan Jett came into the van with like a cloud of pot smoke around her. She was just like drifted in with her like that. But it was a good time.
You don't still have that van, do you?
No, what van was it even? I think I rented a van, and my friend Tracy Morgan, who's a set decorator for like J. Crew, came in and like did the whole like Christmas kind of winter theme, because we were really close to Christmas.
The lights.
And there's such an ugly interior of an empty van, and I wanted it to be colorful and warm. So I think we just had a cargo van, and then it was just dressed really nice.
Wow, that's so cool.
It was fun. It was cool.
I'm curious about building your team, because you've had a long history. Like, I want to throw a Texas reference to you, because I know you shot in Texas.
No way. How did you throwing a reference at me?
Yeah, Bug's film, the short. I don't know many people that probably know
Bug
this.
Davidson.
Yeah.
I love Bug.
Well, how did you start out? Can you give me how did you get into this?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I've always wanted to be a filmmaker, and I never could really admit that. So I had a lot of like creative lives before coming to filmmaking, but I left school when I was 14 years old, so I didn't even have a high school diploma. I certainly never went to art school, so I didn't really feel like somebody like me could be a filmmaker. Like, I just thought, like, that's not allowed. This is like a class line that you don't cross. And thankfully, I moved to San Francisco, where there was a ton of other working class queers like me who also didn't have degrees. But we had this mutual kind of art school thing happening in San Francisco in the 90s, where it was just like, what's your dream? What do you want to do? Oh, you want to make a film? Okay, let's get together, figure out how to make a film. And the first film that I worked on was a film called By Hook or By Crook, which is like a cult classic at this time. It's Harry Dodge and Silas Howard. An amazing experience, and I loved it. And I kind of got in on the AD team at that point. So after that, I started being an assistant director. So I was second AD, second, then first AD, and that's what I did for Bug. I was Bug's AD, and I loved it. You have to be like completely obsessed with detail and a crazy person. Scratch that. Don't let me say that. You have to be obsessed with detail, and you have to just like not care that you're going to work 21 hours a day for every day for as long as the shoot is. But still through that, I was like, oh, okay, I'm learning about what directors do, and eventually I'll be able to direct something. But I kept working as an AD and working for probably almost 10 years as an AD. And then Kathleen knew that I wanted to make films. And so when she came to me to ask me to potentially work with her on a La Tigra documentary, I really pushed her to tell her own story. Because at that time she was incredibly sick and she had mystery illness. Nobody knew what was wrong with her. And forever, and it was so serious, in fact, that people were really afraid for her future. We were afraid for her life. So was she. So was her husband. It was really intense. And so, for me, I just had to panic that her story be told by her on her terms, and with her saying what she felt comfortable saying. And she knew, so I challenged her on that. And then she challenged me on making it. So I was like, you have to tell your own story. And she's like, well, okay, you have to make it then. And so we kind of had a pact. So it was a friend pushing a friend thing to go to an uncomfortable place, which is what all of us need to get to the next place that we want to be in our artistic careers.
What did you think of the people's reaction to the film, but also the way in which the music and the scene continue to expand? I mean, when you look back on these last 10 years, how do you feel the film plays for you?
You mean, what do I think of it now, looking at it, or what do I think about what happened with Kathleen after it, or?
Let's start with Kathleen, because I don't know if many people know the full skill. I'd love to hear that first.
Yeah. So when the film premiered, I think Kathleen was getting to a better place in her health, and she continued to do that, and she just really wanted to be out there making music again, which she wasn't sure she was going to be able to do. After the film, she put together a new band called the Julie Ruin, which was inspired off of her solo project that she did in the late 90s. And so she toured with the Julie Ruin, and I think probably the punk singer gave her a lot of energy. People were really jazzed to hear her story. They were motivated by it, and I think that if your fans are motivated, it motivates you, But yeah, she's been working really hard, It was like Julie Ruin on tour, then Bikini Kill went on tour, and then just this last summer, well, then there was a pandemic, and then this last summer, La Tigra finally went on tour again, which was incredible. It's the best band.
And then for you, as looking at the film and the legacy of the film and where you place it,
I'm going to be really honest and say that it's really difficult. It's not something that I've allowed myself to think about a lot over the last several years. It was really, really difficult. It was a difficult project to finish. Like I said, I was like, I don't know if I ever want to do this again. But then I made a Kathy Opie doc for LACMA and had such a supportive team, and it was amazing. And I was like, right, who am I kidding? Of course I'm going to make it again. But, being poor is not a cute look, you know what I mean? And so you can have a lot of outward seeming success, IFC picked up your film. It had a theatrical release in 125 American cities. It won these awards. And still, you're in debt from making the film. So, that does inspire me. One of the films in my black book, I have a little black book full of films that I want to make, is about artists being totally robbed by streaming and asking the question, how are we supposed to survive if big business isn't really willing to pay for our art?
And that's across the board, music, film, everywhere.
Yeah, it's across the board. It's almost like you should be so lucky that we took your film. You should be so lucky that it's screening all over the place. And it's like, no, you should be so lucky that you have a bunch of artists making stuff that you can't make yourself, So there's not a lot of respect for, and this, I want to say especially for documentary filmmakers. If you have a trust fund and you can make films that way, great. If you don't, good luck. It is so incredibly difficult. And we need to, as filmmakers, organize around that. And I think the wider public needs to know what the truth is, because there's all these outward appearances about how great it is. And in some ways it is. It's amazing. It's exciting. But when you can't afford to get on the train, and you've just been dropped off by a black SUV who's driving you around to do interviews, and you're like, this looks so amazing, but I can't get on the train. You know what I mean? There's something wrong with that picture, So I can't wait to talk about that in a further project. But this is 10 years after releasing it, and I'm probably finally getting to a place where I feel comfortable talking about how hard it was to make the film.
Is it tough to watch it then? Or do you enjoy watching it?
Not at all. I love watching it.
Yeah.
I love watching it. I had a lot of fun shooting it. We had a lot of fun shooting it. We had an incredible crew. And my partner is in it. So my partner is Johanna Fateman, who's in La Tigra. And so that's easy on the eyes. I get to see her up on screen. We weren't together at the time. We got together after the film came out. We were friends. So that's really fun. She's super smart. And I love seeing everybody that's on the screen. I have a lot of respect for everybody that appears in the film, for the way that we made the film. I'm really proud of it. And if it could stay that insular and between the fans and the people who program it, people really liked it. They loved it, And so that part is incredible. That part is really amazing. And so, no, I love watching it. I don't have a hard time watching it at all.
Do you mind if I ask? You said 25 terabytes, but I'm just curious. Do you have a semblance of what you want to do with that footage?
My current project?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's done in my head, It's a several-part documentary series. I think at least 7 parts. And it's about kind of quote-unquote mystery illnesses that women are diagnosed with, like chronic fatigue, late-stage Lyme, and now long COVID. And those women end up getting completely let down by medical and by science because they're being misdiagnosed and mistreated. It's kind of a whistleblower film, and so I'm really excited about it. And I think it's an incredibly important film that could change women's health and the health of people of color in this country.
how
But
historical.
who has the money to finish it?
But I'm curious how historical. I feel like this is something that's been throughout the history of medicine. Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's totally historical. I mean, basically, right now in this country, and then there are so many countries around the world that take our lead. The science that, for the most part, the science that we're working with, there's absolutely exceptions for this, but most of it is science that has been conducted on white male bodies. And we don't respond the same way. We don't have the same bodies. And so with a disease like late stage Lyme, which just means you got sick with Lyme disease, you got bit by a tick. This is so political. I have no idea how it can be so political. And you do your treatment and you don't get better. You continue sometimes to get worse. Of the people that have that reaction, 95% of them are women. And 100% of the science, let's say 99% of the science, is done on white male bodies. So you're testing the wrong bodies. So you're saying it doesn't exist. We're over here, hundreds of thousands of women in this country alone, actually 2 million in last count, saying we're sick. And we're being called psychosomatic. We're saying this is psychosomatic illness. And so this project that with the 25 terabytes kind of unfolds over time. But it's a heavy topic, you know, and I actually am I'm one of the subjects in the film, as well as the director. That makes me nervous, but it's fine. I'm willing to take one for the team. I didn't want to be like a lesbian Michael Moore, but somebody had to be. So I decided it could be me. And also I'm willing to like do a pratfall to get a laugh. I mean, the topic is really heavy, but also, you know what? Life is really heavy. You know, it doesn't mean that we're not also, if we're sick, that we're also not having fun, we're not laughing, that we're not making art or going to see art. If we can do it, we're doing it. Doesn't mean we're not fucking. It's like we're still people. We just happen to be sick with an illness that society says isn't real. And they don't know that it's not, if it's real or not, because they've never tested our bodies. And so I think with long COVID, there is parallels all over the place with that. And so...
Did that reignite you, that?
Well, I got COVID right out of the gate. Like, I always thought I was like the perfect person to be with at the end of the world. Like, oh, I'll have the right tools and I'll know how to do this or that. I'm like, don't follow me at the end of the world. Like, I got sick I was sick before they were saying there was 50 cases or 75 cases. But it wasn't true. We live in West Harlem and people were sick all over the place. There just wasn't a test. And the government was coming up on screen, on TV, and being like, don't panic, get on the train. No, it's not airborne. You know, don't freak out and shop. And like this whole thing of like lying to people, telling them to get on a train. Anyway, boom, I got it. It was really, really terrifying. And I have a compromised immune system, so it wasn't surprising when I went on to develop long COVID symptoms. But for me, it was a moment where the whole project just clicked. Because right before COVID, I was at the end of the film. I was just trying to get the money to do a few experts and go into the edit, and then COVID happened. And because I'm obsessed with documentation, I put the camera on, and I've self-documented all the way through COVID, through those like couple of weeks of not knowing if I was going to live or die. And then when I wasn't getting better, I put the camera on again, you know? And so now the film begins and ends with COVID. And it takes us back 10 years to when I got sick. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of instincts, and I've got nothing to lose. So I'm just like...
Well, I hope people will find a way to bring this money to you so you can bring this out. I want to see this.
At some point.
I'd love to ask, did telling Kathleen's story trigger this too? Is this also like seeing what she went through and...
Well, I I got incredibly sick while making The Punk Singer. So a couple of months after Kathleen was finally diagnosed, I got really sick. I ended up in the emergency room in New York City. I didn't know what was going on. And in a twist that was mortifying to me at the moment, I ended up being diagnosed eventually also with late stage Lyme. And I just felt like this is like a bad high school thesis or a bad undergraduate thesis. Like this, I cannot have my subject's disease. That can't happen. Like, and the hell that I put myself through for, like, you can't talk about it. You can't, like, it was crazy. It was just like so bananas. And so I almost couldn't believe it. But I was really, really sick in trying to finish The Punk Singer. So after the film was out and it was touring around, at every screening that I went to, people would stand up and be like, thank you so much for talking about mystery illness of, chronic Lyme disease, of late stage Lyme disease, or thank you so much for talking about, chronic illness in general. It was, all these mostly young women that were saying that they were really sick, they couldn't get answers. So kind of this film was kind of handed to me. It was like, what am I going to, like, it kept coming up. And then there was a young woman who was completely gaslit, not somebody that I knew well, but was being gaslit, not only by science and medicine, but eventually then by her own community, and she ended up taking her own life. And for a couple of days, I was so distraught and upset about this, and I was like, what can I do? And I was like, I can make a film, It's like, I know how to make a film that can make a film. And I thought it would be like 2 years, and now it's 8 years later. So, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
You did.
It was ignited. It was ignited by The Punk Singer did kind of organically lead me into this project So Sick that I've been working on.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Sini, thank you for taking me through this journey. And
thanks for talking to me.
It was a pleasure. And thank you for bringing the film to Sound Unseen. This is a real pleasure.
I can't wait for it tonight.